So,
What are we talking
so
about today?
today we wanted to talk about federalization, and we kind of wanted to get your
Whoa,
input.
good topic.
Yeah, we've noticed it's like a hot take right now, and there's just like a lot going on, and we really wanted to get your input and what you thought about it, and just kind of get some insight from somebody like you who has skin in the game, and this really affects, I think, everybody, and I think you could really give us some insight.
You want me to be honest?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, let it fly. um, yeah, I think we're in a really interesting time, especially with um, Brittany Reiner, coming home.
Yes, oh my
I think it's
goodness. I read that,
hmm
just the other day, and I think that that in itself is just such a hot topic, It's there's a lot of
and I think
people.
it puts them in a very interesting situation, actually. I think it's going to be, it has the potential of being really good for at least federal legalization advocates that, now they have some ammunition that, you traded a, a killer or a terrorist for somebody that was jailed in Russia for cannabis. And, here we're sitting in the United States with over 40,000 federal prisoners for cannabis. And like, how do we reach out and do a trade like that and still allow our people to remain in prison? It seems like they've just, unless they're planning on doing something anyways, it seems like their hands are gonna be forced to make some comments or make some moves. At least that's my hope. Because of the way it's going now, it just really feels pretty torturous in a lot of different ways. Not to talk about my situation, but after having gone to jail and done quite a bit of time for this plant, you know, thinking that there was ever an end and that it would be over. Um, there's some kind of resolution to that. But for me, the last time, and I think I've shared with you that, I tried to go to New Zealand for a 40th birthday party with my uncle, a fishing trip, and flew all the way over to Auckland, got to the customs window where one of the questionnaires on the pamphlet we had to fill out on the plane was, have you ever been incarcerated? And having, been off probation, doing everything by the rules, having done my time, I thought it was okay to tell the truth and to say, yeah, I had done some time. And, the hand of the custom agent went up, and I was met by two custom agents and taken into a back room, and they started to question me, what was my crime? What did I do? Blah, blah, blah. And then, after they asked me a million different questions, they filled me in on the fact that New Zealand doesn't allow anybody that's been incarcerated for more than 5 years ever to come into their country. And so where I thought, there was some kind of resolution to finishing my sentence, here I am with my uncle, really excited, first trip since I've been home. And then they air marshaled me back on the very next plane to San Francisco, and I had to leave my uncle there. And so it was, again, a very traumatic thing for me, a reminder that maybe I won't ever be truly free, and not to bring it full circle to me, because I feel very fortunate. I am at home, I am warm, I am eating good food, but it's just another example of, the laws that the federal government have, that they can follow you around forever. And even though that was my first time nonviolent offense, I'm still dealing with that. I still can't go to Canada, I can't go to New Zealand still. And so until they federally legalize cannabis and abolish a lot of these different rules that they have, I might never see those places. we have so many different people that are sitting in jail that don't have the freedoms that I do. And it's just really kind of frustrating and sad, and a lot of different emotions that go around that. If you truly understand what those people are really experiencing. And, unfortunately, quite a few of them probably have children or wives or ex-wives or husbands or ex-husbands, because we always think of, federal prisoners as being men, but, there's quite a few, if not just as many, female prisoners that are going through the same kind of stuff. So I was pretty fortunate while I was in there, was able to write to other prisoners in other prisons, and it's really interesting, and it was I look forward to it, actually, to receiving letters from different prisoners in different prisons and hearing what they're going through and what they deal with, and if it was similar to what I was dealing with. And really found that the prison that I was in at Lompoc in Central California was really corrupt. It was brutally, it was bad. The guards and the people that are working at the prison are making $18 to $20 an hour, and there's quite a few white-collar criminals that were in there that were able to influence the guards to allow them to have special privileges. And there was a few times that I remember being in the group that was getting a special privilege, and I'm talking about, like, on Thanksgiving Day, we had a outside catering truck cater a Thanksgiving dinner for 13 of us down at the farm, which is a little bit separate area from the camp. And the only condition was that the guards got to eat first. So the guards that worked on Thanksgiving Day that didn't probably really want to be there allowed us to have this decked out meal with turkey and gravy and all the fixings, and they grabbed their plates and they loaded up and they ate first, and then we got to spend a couple hours down away from the camp together, and got to have a great meal and just forget about really where we were for an hour or two. So in saying that, you had to be very careful with how far you push the limit. You could push it far enough where you could end up getting in trouble at the camp, and then they would throw you in the hole, and then you would be moved to like a medium security prison where there was fences and you didn't have some of these unknown privileges. So anyway, there was a little ramble. Sorry.
No worries. John, do you think that if it federally becomes legal that they just open up the prison and they allow these guys to go free and watched, or is that kind of how you view it happening?
God, I really wish I had better insight on what that would look like. But, I'm looking at it, in the first place my mind goes to, and, back when I was in jail, a lot of these federal prisons were privatized, and the commissary, a place where, like, kind of a little store where we could go every week and spend money on toothpaste and toothbrushes and tuna and this and that. Those were all privately owned too. So they generate quite a bit of money for that private sector, those investors. And when I was in there between 1996 and 2004, I was hearing that for each inmate that they had in there, it was between $26,000 and $30,000 per head that the federal government, paid these prisons to hold us. So, there was not many times where you found the prison under occupied, and most of the times the beds were completely full, kind of like school, right? Like the schools get a certain amount of money from the state for every head that's there. So that's why they do roll call. Same with the prison. So when they do our counts, they make sure that every bed is full, and even cots that are out in the walkways, sometimes people would stay until other people left. And we were always at overcapacity, and so for every person that didn't have a bed that was on a cot that was in the aisleway, that was an extra $30,000 for whoever. And so it just seems more like it became a business and took out it was no longer about these are people, these are just,
Dollar
ways
signs.
to generate money.
Yeah, they're dollar signs. They're walking dollar signs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Well, I think
and I heard
California
a few
has
of the
gotten-
private. Sorry, I just heard that a few of the private prisons, maybe the one at Atwater, a few of them got closed, but maybe.
Yeah, I
now
think
they're gonna
all of
start to
them-
reopen some.
I think all of them has officially been closed. I just read an article about it the other day that in California anyway, I think they've been closed.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Yeah, so I don't know. Are they going to let them all out? I doubt it. I think they're going to try to find a way to slowly let the most nonviolent ones, kind of like what we just did with the federal. Biden let out the non-petty, the petty criminals or something, cannabis criminals or something,
like
and there was like none.
Yeah, low
So I think
convictions.
they'll slowly poke their way at it until eventually maybe they all get released, and maybe some of our federal records for nonviolent crimes can be expunged, and then maybe will free us up. I don't know how that works with those countries that still talk about doing more than 5 years of time and this and that. So I have to navigate that when that time comes. But first things first is I think they'll schedule it from a Scheduled 1 drug to a Scheduled 2 drug and see how that affects it. And I just can't imagine that all the different states will have some kind of legalization with cannabis and then not federally legalizing it or decriminalizing it or something. I don't know.
And how do you view it just from a business standpoint? Like, do you think, how do you kind of see the landscape once it's federally legal and being able to kind of cross those state lines?
Well, we're all very much hopeful that when federal legalization comes, that we'll be able to go from state to state. But I'm sure with that is going to come a whole bunch of other rules and regulations, and hopefully the feds just don't make up their own rules and regulations. I mean, we've already overcome county rules, city rules, state rules. Like when the feds legalize it, like they might have their whole set of other rules that maybe some of us won't be able to fit into, and I don't know what that looks like. So a little fearful of what that looks like, but also at the same time hopeful and excited that being able to share Humboldt weed with New York, being able to go to New York and these other states that have always heard about us but never got to interact with us. Now we'll be able to share our story, and I think it will really resonate even more with them than it has with California.
Do you think early on, like just price point for Humboldt weed in New York, let's just say, I would imagine that anytime you're moving cross state lines, it's going to land in some federal tax loophole that they tax you as well as the state. I imagine there's going to be some cost in there, but do you foresee like where Humboldt weed then pushes up in price and value just because now you can get homegrown California cannabis from Humboldt in other places, Chicago, Arizona, New York?
I would like to think that, and some people think that. I really don't think that. I think that, you're going to have all these other agricultural states just growing thousands and thousands of acres of it. If we can overcome some of the hurdles and get to direct to consumer where I can make a box up of my strains that I grew this year and send them once a month to different consumers and just set my own price, I think there's an opportunity there. But otherwise, I just don't, it's going to be like growing lettuce,
Mm-hmm.
really. I mean, we can grow some amazing product and it can be amazing, and there'll be certain cultivars in situations where we get a little bit more, but I don't know if a little bit more is like another 5 cents a head of lettuce, or it's not going to ever be like it was. And I think we're all hoping that, oh, well, with federal legalization, it's going to go back to $5,000 a pound. Those big companies will never allow us to make that much profit. If there's that much profit in it, they will gobble it up, and they will oversaturate the market, the nation, the world, until it gets down to those margins where they're able to operate, and maybe a lot of us can't. And there's different countries like China and all these other places that have an opportunity to grow, and I don't know what all that looks like. I just don't believe it's ever going to be like it was, and we have to stop thinking it was, and hope for direct sales to consumer is really my biggest hope, because interacting with the consumer, building that relationship is really where I'm finding excitement, and really what drives us today, with the tourism license, with sharing our product. We're going to the Emerald Cup this weekend, which is held once a year down in Santa Rosa. And even though this isn't the actual contest part, this is more of what they call a harvest ball. And so a bunch of us farmers will get together and gather and celebrate and share our product from this past year with people that follow us or that we've become friends with, and with each other. And it's just a really bonding time, that a time where we get to kind of reflect and talk to one another and see if we can figure out a pathway forward that really works, because I just know that a lot of the farmers are going to fallow their farms this upcoming year, just because they're not able to generate enough money to pay permitting fees and licensing fees and all the different fees that's involved with having a legal cannabis farm. And so super excited about that, but more excited about being able to talk with the consumer and have that connection, that appreciation of what we're doing. Because when we're one-on-one with them, it's just them and us, and then it's about the real stuff, and it's not about faking it or trying to trick anybody. It's yeah.
I like it. I worry about big pharma, and I worry about corporate cannabis, but I guess it's just the stages that the industry goes through, right? Like alcohol went through the same stages, and I just think there's so much value in the craft cannabis that I see a lot of value, and I guess it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone will see that value. I mean, it's like a Napa bottle of wine being sold in France or in New York, or when they come down and they go to Napa, they're like, oh my gosh, this is Napa, home of the wine. And I always just view that as Humboldt, because I always thought Humboldt was, that's where the best weed, and I guess you're right. I guess
yeah,
it might just
I agree with that too. I definitely agree with it, and I do think that a lot of us in the Emerald Triangle that have some of those strains that are unique to our farms that nobody else in the world has, will start to really gain a lot of interest from the consumer, because even though this industry is really fairly new with the amount of cannabis that's being sold on the recreational market, they're going to get tired of smoking ice cream cake and wedding cake and gelatos and all that. And after a while, they're going to start to really search out and seek out those strains that nobody else in the world has, that they want to try and see. Maybe they'll like them, maybe they won't like them, but we're the only ones that have those unique genetics. And so eventually they'll be coming to us, they'll be learning about our strains and where they originated from, and either that will be something they're super interested in, or they'll go back to smoking wedding cake. And but we'll never be able to sell it at as low a price point as Big Ag is selling it. So we have to really educate them on why we're different, how we're different, and that just takes a lot of time. And, you know, a lot of us are pretty tired, to be honest. It's been, even though it's only been 4 or 5 years, it feels exhausting because it's every day. It's not like, okay, it's winter, we're off. It's still, we're doing something. We're emailing, we're trying to figure out pathways forward that can work for our farms and work for other farms. And it gets really tiring, and knowing how to shut it off is really been challenging for a lot of us. And you'll look at farmers and they look so weathered, me included. So, yeah. So still super excited, super passionate about what we do. Just really want to interact more with the one-on-ones with the consumer, and try to get rid of all the riffraff in between us and them. And
well, I mean, I think that's been that's the hardest thing to do, is as a grower going through 3 or 4 different people just to get your product out. I get it, right? It's part of the way it's regulated, and they try to limit control, but it's
you know, another thing I've been really trying to figure out, and I don't know enough about it to truly understand it, but you know, the state of California, Gavin Newsom with the DCC, you know, they're giving a lot of different grants out to small farmers. They're giving us, Fish and Wildlife is giving quite a bit of money out to different farmers if you qualify for grants. And, you know, I'm talking grants, you know, water storage, $50,000, other grants, you know, $60,000, $80,000. And it just seems really funny that they're taxing us and charging us permitting fees for growing the cannabis, and then they take that money and then they give it back to us, and that grant money that we get back, we also get charged taxes on. So like, they're taxing us for the money, taking it and then throwing it back at us, and then taxing us again, and it's just like circulating, and they keep taking more of it and more of it and more of it. So I haven't really applied for any of the grant money because I don't see the strategy behind it, and I'm not trying to be, you know, all weirded out about, oh, they're trying to give us money, it's not for a good reason. I just don't understand why they're trying to do this, and unless it's just into the public eye that Gavin Newsom wants to say, we're trying to help the small farmer, we're doing everything we can, and forget about Proposition 64. Forgive us for that because now we're giving you all this money. But I don't know. We'll see. It'll play out. It's gonna tell its own story here soon enough. And yeah.
Yeah, those grants are interesting. So Sacramento has some grants for security and some other like interesting grants, in my opinion. To your point, it's like they're giving you the money to take it back. I mean, they literally turn around and then ask us for more stuff, right? And so, yeah, the whole thing is crazy. I have a neighbor who also, he took some of the grant money, and they're not at all business owners, right? And so, therein lies another problem: is they never ran a business, but they were given money to start a business, and so. That's also interesting. That's a whole other like interesting subject when it comes down to talking about just kind of our market and how our market works. And so a lot of people have been talking about high THC. I don't know if you saw that Stizzy just got sued for faking their results or having their results
inflated.
Pushed up. What's that?
Inflated.
Having their higher THC is an inflated test score or something.
Yeah, and the interesting thing when I was reading through is the DCC actually allows for a 10% variant, meaning that they could have had 20% and the lab could have showed 29% and they would have been under the 10% and still would have been fine. But they were showing 40 to 50% on their joints. And so they went well over the 10%, and that's why they're getting sued. Go ahead.
So when we go in for a COA test, so this is how it works with us. So we grow the flower, we trim it up, or however we do it, and then we have to send it to a manufacturing facility distributor. they different labs that you could request. And so here lies part of the problem, is that you're requesting a lab to come pick up a sample to be tested. And so if you consistently get that lab that comes there and is testing your product and you're getting lower scores, you're probably going to call another lab. Makes sense. So it really behooves those labs to turn the dial up a little bit when we're testing Huckleberry Hill Farms, because he'll keep coming back and asking for those, that same lab. And so, but the reality of it is I could have a pound of weed trimmed off the same plant. You could take one bud. You could say they're all 1 gram buds, and say I take 454 of those buds and I test each and every one of them. It's going to come out totally different. Yeah, there'll be a little variance here and there, but they'll all be different. And it's crazy. So I don't know the solution to the problem, but it's a giant problem. It's a huge problem. And I heard there was a big controversy thing that happened over in Oklahoma this last week with this Cowboy Cup, similar to the Emerald Cup, a contest where a bunch of flower, 40 different samples got submitted and tested, all passed the labs, which I truly believe. And then when the judges were going to judge it, they actually visually identified mold that was on some of the samples, and 20 out of the 40 samples. And so,
wow.
I think a lot of that, I think the DCC, especially in California, is going to start to grab product off of shelves at the retail level and start to test it. And the problem is after it sits for a month or two, like, those tests could come out totally different. So hopefully that 10% variance is still within your thing. Or what do? Recall that whole batch. So if all your flower is out in the different retail shop, that's a lot of investment, more so for a small farmer than a big ag farmer. And so, it could be devastating if I have 1,000 jars of white thorn rose out in the marketplace and they grab one specific jar and say it's 20%, but the COA test says on that batch, maybe it was supposed to be 27, or by the other way around. If it says it's, whatever, if it's different than what it says, and they make me recall it, it could be devastating to some of the small farmers. So I don't know how they navigate it. I guess it's going to play out however it does, but the whole industry altogether is one big, huge, giant problem. And the reality of it is that most of us in the Emerald Triangle, most of the small farmers are just really trying to grow a plant and produce some kind of medicine that will help somebody's ailment and let somebody sleep a little bit better at night, and not focus on all these worldly disasters that are happening right now that are stressing everybody out and causing a lot more problems than we probably even know right now. So it's just a plant, and I keep coming back to that.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me because I feel like it's the steroid era. I don't know if you remember baseball back when Barry Bonds and these guys were doing steroids, and it's like, you can't be upset with the person who's taking the steroid because the owner is paying more money for you to hit home runs, and the owners have the people are going into the stands and they love baseball because they're watching this home run ball, right? Like, everyone's winning from it, but it's wrong. You know what I mean? And I just feel like that's like cannabis right now. It's like Stizzy. Everybody loves Stizzy. I mean, I remember back when we were operating our delivery. I mean, that's all anybody wanted was Stizzy all the time. And these guys are just trying to compete. And so trying to compete, they're faking THC percentages to get more customers, more money, right? I guess that's just consumerism. But then I just wonder, are we just dumbing down our consumer? So our consumer just, it's THC equals value, which I think is just I've never bought alcohol based off a percentage. Like, I'll get a stronger beer every once in a while, but I wouldn't pay more for that beer. Like, I paid the same thing for a blonde that has low alcohol than I would for a a hoppy that has a higher alcohol content. You know what I mean? It just really comes down to, do I want to get really drunk or do I want to have a good time?
Yeah, and then packaging comes into play a little bit there, right? You can have a generic packaging, you can have a Coors Light beer can versus a nice craft beer bottle with all kinds of, fancy designs on there. Same with, the cannabis, there's more and more the bright blue cookies, packaging, flashy, all these different cartoon characters on there, or you could just, have some amazing Sticky Fields weed in a generic bag. And yeah, it's unfortunate that the bigger companies are able to market and brand to a wider consumer base than we are, and whatever rhetoric they want to pass along and get that consumer to believe is kind of generally what they're believing. And so that's why we've ended up with the higher the THC means the better the pot or the better the quality of the pot, and that's just not the case. And so once they've instilled that in somebody's mind, like it's harder to break that. If they would have learned what makes cannabis amazing from the very beginning, and it wasn't just THC, we would be in a totally different spot. But now that it's kind of set in stone that the higher the THC, the stoner you'll get, or the higher you get, or the better that cannabis is, it's really hard to go backtrack and say, this 15% number 26 grown by Canna Country that's only 15% THC, that 1 second in the Emerald Cup will make you feel far more amazing than this 45% high THC, one-sided, lopsided, unbalanced cannabis. So it's hard to go backwards, but maybe it's one person at a time. Maybe it's events like the Emerald Cup, like we're going to, that one-on-one interaction with the consumer. Yeah.
It's interesting because I remember back in high school, right? We used to smoke, I don't know, I guess brown weed, right? And so when, as the weed got better, you never, I guess the thought was I can smoke less for more value, right? And that's what we think of as THC. So I can buy this for $20, a little nug for $20, and this is going to get me higher than if I buy an eighth of brown weed for $20, and I got to smoke more of it and get the seeds out, right? And so I understand the concept, but I was never sold on THC. I was just always sold on either their strain or how good the cannabis was, right? And so THC wasn't a thing as we were growing up. And so it's interesting that now we relate THC to value, and you would think like the higher THC, the less I have to smoke. But I don't have any friends that, regardless if it's a 20% joint or a 30% joint, they're smoking that whole joint regardless, right? Like they're not taking a high THC joint and smoking half of it and saying, okay, since it's 30%, I only have to smoke half. And so I understand value to, I don't have to, like a nutritional value type of thing. I don't need to eat as much as this to get the same nutritional value. But it's just not the case for THC, or is it? And I guess this might be a question for Jenny and Scotty, but do you have to smoke less of a higher THC to get the same effect? Is that the thinking behind higher THC?
The thinking behind higher THC is that you essentially smoke less because you're getting high, because it is a higher THC content. But I think then again it lies like the misconception that high THC is what's is better. I tell people all the time I've smoked stuff at 15, 16%, 18% that's gotten me really a nice stony high, and I've smoked stuff at 30% that not so much. I get high, but the high lasts about a half hour, and I'm like, oh, okay, like maybe that wasn't as strong as it says on the bottle.
I think for some people it also, we've kind of talked about this in the past, it's kind of like you go into like terpenes or the type of like strains that you prefer that make you feel good. Like maybe you don't know what the terpenes in a specific strain are, but hey, when I smoke this, Skittles, I know that it's like a heavier high for me. I usually get the munchies. It makes me really tired. For me, I know personally when I smoke like Watermelon Z, it's like a indica strain, and I actually do feel indica effects from that strain, and it makes me get the munchies really bad. And then sometimes I'll smoke other flowers that are also indicas, maybe have a higher THC, and I'm not feeling the same effects that I do with that other strain. So I think sometimes for consumers, for some, I think it does come to THC, but I think that's like nativity, like they don't understand it. But I think for consumers who actually know what they're purchasing and who go in to the dispensary or they go to their farmer looking for something specific, I think a lot of people are going based off of like a flower or a strain they've already tried in the past, or they're telling you a taste or a smell that they like in a flower.
Yeah, unfortunately, where we're at now in the industry, one of the, one of the things that a lot of the bigger ag players are doing are really they're incentivizing bud tenders who really are the to consumer. They suggest most of the time what flower. A consumer will come up to the counter and say, look, I'm looking for a sativa, I'm looking for an indica, I'm looking for this, and whatever flower they grab and put in front of them, typically they'll purchase, especially not knowing. Some of them don't do that, but a lot of consumers do that. So at the end of the month, if I'm a bud tender and I sold 30 jars of Glass House, Glass House maybe writes me a check, a bonus for selling their product more so than Huckleberry Hills. And that's really hard to overcome because there's none of that kind of money left for us to even compete in that way. But, kind of going back to that THC content, like if it was just about THC, why wouldn't a consumer just buy a pen that was like 80% THC?
Yeah.
But there has to be certain things, edibles, oil, they make you feel different. So like if you're looking for a specific feeling, I guess maybe is when you seek out different flower. But I don't know, it's really hard to identify exactly why people purchase what they purchase. It's just really, really hard. And I understand that not everybody is going to love the flower that I grow here, but it still matters to me that they understand the reasoning behind why I'm growing it, how I'm growing it. And if it doesn't make them feel amazing, that's okay, because Hogwash Farms or Ridgeline Farms or Savage Farms, I have plenty of friends that grow different cultivars that might make them feel amazing, that grow organically, that do all these things that if there was a Whole Foods of cannabis would be in that Whole Foods market. And I guess it comes down to if you care about what you're putting in your body. I mean, some of us shop at Whole Foods, and some of us are fortunate enough to be able to grow our own food. Some of us are not fortunate enough to be able to afford to shop at Whole Foods. So there's going to be that difference too, where somebody can only afford to buy a $5 eighth that might not be grown organically, that might who knows what it could be. And so I don't want to fault anybody for not having that choice, because some people are in different situations. And so I just want to make whatever product that I'm growing affordable, where I can make a living, but they can have that amazing experience. And I don't know. It's not easy.
I think that was perfect. Johnny, don't go anywhere. I'm gonna end it, but don't go anywhere. Stay there.
Okay, I'm not going anywhere.
No, I think we touched on some really great topics, some really good conversation.
Yeah. And the THC, back to that, the percentage. I had somebody pull up. They bought us some gelato that was a lower THC percentage that they anticipated. So I was walking away from curbside, And she calls out and says, hey, walk over to her. I go, yeah, how can I help you? She goes, would I be able to return this? It's got a low THC percentage. And I said, I was like, you're not really, you can't, return flower once it's purchased, it's purchased. I was like, but trust me, I was like, it's great flower. I was like, here's something I'll let you in on. I was like, a lot of labs have been getting in trouble lately because they've been hiking up the THC percentages for companies. And she was like, oh, she's like, I know that's right. She's like, you know what? She says, I thought something was weird. She says, because I bought something the other day that was like 20% and I got really high. She says, and then I smoked some stuff that was like 30% and I didn't feel anything from it. And I go, well, there lies your answer. I was like, so don't be too quick to give up on these low percentage strains you find. I was like, because you may be surprised by them. And she ended up going with it, but it's just, I just thought it was interesting that she was so willing to trade in her flower that she was so willing to purchase before, just simply off of its low THC percentage.
We just need to do a bunch of blind taste tests.
Yeah.
Right? A bunch of, just all kinds of different, from 10% THC all the way to whatever the highest one you can find, and just kind of, the more and more things that we do like that, sheds light on the 15% THC 26s that are winning the Emerald Cups and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it'll break that stigma down. The higher the THC, the better.
So it's just one person at a time.
And I also just think that craft cannabis, I just think there's value there in the sun grown, just that feel. Like I can't explain. Like I know what it feels like in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think anyone, once they go to your farm, I think you've got a customer hooked for life. You know what I mean? And I think you made a good point of not everyone can afford. And again, your cannabis isn't even that expensive. You know what I mean? Compared to these other ones, it's just either it's a brand name or people value indoor high THC more than they value outdoor.
Mm-hmm.
And they're paying twice as much for the indoor, right?
Yeah.
So they think that they're getting a higher quality product because they're paying more for it. Like buying a fillet versus a flank steak. Yes.
But if I were to put your flower up at $90, nobody would buy it because they'd be like, oh, that's outdoor. You're supposed to get outdoor for cheaper, right? Yep. And it's like the guy who's growing outdoors is actually putting in more work. Again, no disrespect to anyone that grows indoor. But it's a different feel.
It's a different
everything's
process,
different. Well, the people are different.
Mm-hmm.
The farmers I meet, in Humboldt, are they're farmers. They're dudes. They're people that I can talk to and know. Most indoor grows, I have a buddy who's an indoor grower, but so I'm not talking shit about them. They're just more a little bit on the harder side, if that makes any.
I think what you're describing is, it's weird because a lot of the outdoor Emerald Triangle farmers really develop relationships or a connection with that plant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like I learned how to grow whitethorn rose or mom's weed in 1 year. It took me years and years, and it was bred to that strain. My mom grew with me when I was 10. And so there's this deeper connection that nurturing a child that comes with that, where I don't believe, and I've grown indoor before, plenty, and I don't believe I ever had that attachment to one plant because there's just so many, it's just different. It's just a different feel in there. It's not like you're outside in nature and maybe there's a hummingbird on there or frogs jumping around. It just feels like you're out in nature and there's a connection there versus a commercialized product that you're growing inside a building that's sprayed or sterile or whatever. It just has a whole different feel. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. So my buddy who grew for the guy who owns the place, he used to always say that, so he used to grow his own cannabis outside. And he used to always say the same thing. Is like, once I leave there, I feel dirty. I feel like I don't feel natural. I feel dirty. And so, yeah, he ended up quitting just because it was just, he said it just wasn't the same, like the same field, the same nothing. And to your point, it was just about, the strain was based around, whatever their cycle was, and then whatever the distributor was buying. And so there was no connection to the plant other than, let me just get the highest THC, let me get this thing pushed out as quickly as possible to get my return so I can grow again in the next 3 months, right? And so their process is just constant, that I don't think they have that opportunity where, again, like, I don't know how to explain it. It's like going to your farm felt right. When I go into my buddy's place, it feels, it feels like a prison almost. It just doesn't feel right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
Like out at your farm, I feel like we can breathe, and it's nature, right? That's what feels right.
It's
and
an experience, and it's a connection that a person can have with it in a very short time that is very connecting. And it's happened so many times with the tours that we give that those people are, forever now friends of mine, and looking forward to seeing you at the Harvest Ball. And how'd your crop come out this year? Yeah, I saw the Whitethorn rose the year before. How did it turn out this year? I can't wait to try it and see for myself. And with all this said, to even take it another step is really to grow your own. And that's really what I try to encourage people to do is the connection to an outdoor cannabis farm like ours here is amazing. But those same people that have that feeling and that connection, that go home and then grow their own, have a totally different relationship with that plant and a totally different feeling. Like they're forever hooked once they grow their own, harvest it, dry it, and then share that with their buddies. It's a whole different, it's addicting. They want that feeling again because it feels good to put a smile on somebody's face.
It's also interesting though, because I would feel if I was growing my own pot, like you would be more of a resource than my buddy who's growing it indoor, right? Not that he doesn't know how to grow. It's just he grows in a different, like his whole demeanor is different than your demeanor, right? And to be honest, John, like you kind of changed the trajectory of my life by going up and meeting with you guys. I was so tired of the corporate cannabis world running my life. And then I saw you guys and I was like, this is what I want to support, right? And then you get the product and nobody wants it. And you're like, why does nobody want this fucking weed? Like, it's so much better than any other weed I have here, but nobody wants this weed because it's either outdoor, they haven't heard the name. They want a stizzy joint, right? And it's just crazy to me that it's not like people don't seek after your guys' weed up there, like all of you guys, right? Like it's just crazy to me that you guys don't lead the charge, and it's some yahoo like my buddy who's growing indoor just mass producing this shit and doesn't really care at all about what he's producing, right? And so
yeah,
it's crazy to my mind how that works, right? And so in Sacramento, we've got like one or two people who are like, oh, I love Humboldt weed. And everyone else, I just don't get it. It's like, are we not getting to them? Are we not reaching out? But if it was, then why wouldn't every delivery in Sacramento have Humboldt weed? Why wouldn't every dispensary in Sacramento have Humboldt weed, right? Like that's a disconnect that it really has changed my perspective in the way that I look at the world. Is like, I want to be helping that cause, right? Like that feeling, that to me is what cannabis